So I want to focus on the first part. Come to me. That is the theme or the focus of my sermon today. And then Hannah, if you could help me with the slides, and as I'm progressing, if you could keep going. I know this is a very, very familiar verse for a lot of us, and we teach our kids as memory words. But I wanted to expand the view of this words so that we could look at it in a much more broader perspective. So I'm going to just focus on "come to me" part. Hannah, if you could go to the second slide. So as we read, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden." But I wanted to also see, like, who should come to him? Is it only the people who are weak and labored and heavy laden, having difficulty? I wanted to just expand, as I said, on this view. Next slide, please. So I've kind of grouped them into two different groups, okay? And I don't take, I'm not calling out anybody or saying anything in person, but I'm just grouping everybody into two groups, okay? Most of us fall in one or the other groups. So I'm just going to focus on the first group earlier, and then we'll go to the second group. And it's called the "I am nothing" syndrome. People who, have that issue or have that problem, right? So they always feel like they are weaker, they have the self-doubt. Next slide, please. So if you feel like you're facing constant challenges in life, you have self-doubt, and you're unsure about taking your next step, and sometimes your faith is questioned, and I also included this group, but I'm not the right person to speak more. But if you're bullied or if you're oppressed, okay, you feel like, man, there's no way out of this. How do I get away from this? I am so down, I cannot do anything more. So I wanted to focus on this group first and take a very, very familiar passage from the Bible to go through this part, the "I am nothing" group, or So if you could turn to Exodus, it's two big chapters, so we are not going to read everything, but it's in Exodus chapter 3 and 4. This is a familiar person, one of the icons in the Bible, Moses, right? Now, this is a very familiar story that as soon as God decided to choose Moses and bring him out to lead the Israelites, these are all the excuses that he had to list. Okay? Before we go to that, if someone could just read from chapter 3, verse 6 through 10, and help me with that.
Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites reached me, and I have seen the way of the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt."
Okay. So God is giving this big introduction. First and foremost, he calls him out into the burning bush and kind of introduces the God and kind of gives him all the background about why he's being called. And what is the first question that he has? Verse 11, if somebody could help.
But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?"
So doubt number one, hey, who am I? Am I the right person to do this? I don't feel like I'm comfortable doing this, right? So this is after God giving all the background that it is me, the God of your forefathers, calling you, who has heard the prayers and giving him all the background. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but after saying all that thing, Moses has the first thing, who am I? And God answers with verse 12. Can we read verse 12?
And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be the sign that that it is I who send you."
Yeah. So God is if I'm like a recruiter or somebody hiring, and people make excuses, I'm not going to try. I would try to explain a little bit, but after a while you kind of lose it, right? So God explains that, hey, this is me, the God, and I'll be with you, okay? And God gives him the assurance that it's not you who is going alone and trying to bring the people out. I'll be with you. What does Moses reply? Verse 13.
Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them?
And Moses, not convinced yet, even though he knows God is talking to him, he's like, what should I tell him? What is your name, right? Okay. So what does God say? Next verse, please.
God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you.
Yeah, thank you. So God has to reintroduce himself, right? This is who I am. Is Moses convinced at this point? No, right? What does he say next?
God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites.
Uncle, if you could read chapter 4, verses 1.
Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you?
Yes. So Moses can't question anymore that, hey, this is the God sending, right? But he's trying to find one way to come, or the other way to wriggle his way out of this situation. So he says, what if they don't listen to me or believe in me? What do I do? Uncle, if you could read the next verse.
Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied.
Thank you. So as you read the next few verses, you would see that God is making desperate attempts. I would really love if a lot of the icons in Bible who've had their fall, if you would see that for just one mistake, they were just struck down, right? And here God is patiently working with Moses and trying to convince him it is God who is sending him. God is who is calling him, but he still has the question. He cannot do it, okay? And God now has to show a sign that I'm not going to go into the sign or what he did, but you are all familiar with it. God has to show a sign. Do you think Moses was convinced at that point? No, right? So what does he say? Verses 10.
Moses said to the Lord, O Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant.
Yes. So this is now the excuse that, hey, yeah, they might listen to me, but they won't understand half of the things that I'm saying. I'm thick-tongued or I'm not eloquent in my speech. A good excuse that most of us make, right, including me, that, hey, I cannot speak. I'm not an eloquent speaker. But God says, you don't need to be eloquent. Who is with you? God, right? Okay, so what does God reply? Next verse, please.
The Lord said to him, who gave man his mouth, who makes him deaf or mute, who gives him sight or makes him blind, is it not I, the Lord? Now go.
Yes. So after all these desperate attempts, is he convinced? One last time, right? He says, verse 13.
But Moses said, O Lord, please send someone else to do it.
Yes. So after every opportunity that he kind of, or every excuses he had made, he's just saying, I just cannot do it. Please choose someone else, right? This time, God is not taking it lightly or just trying to convince him. God is angry, right? Uncle, if you could read.
Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite?
Yes. So at this point, God also has patiently worked with him. And God still is saying, hey, okay, fine, you cannot do it by yourself. I'm going to send your brother Aaron with you. But so God had to make so many attempts to convince Moses, and then he was convinced and he went. If you could go back to the slides, this is how our mentality at a point in time is. You might think that, hey, first and foremost, I don't know if God, you're talking to me. Then it might be, I'm not skilled enough, I'm not eloquent enough, I'm not ready for this, or I'm having a challenging time. I cannot do it. I don't have the time to do this. So we keep making these doubts or sorry, excuses, and we have the self-doubt. This is just one aspect of it. Self-doubt is one aspect. There are other difficulties that a lot of people face is they don't feel they are confident enough to take up a big role or do something for God. Even though they in the bottom of their heart they want to do a lot of things, they don't feel confident enough to do it. They were just waiting, hey, I'll just do the little at once, even though God is calling them to do that bigger role or do something more. They are just not confident. It's a feeling of weakness. So similarly in Gideon's story, we are not going to go into that part, but he does a similar thing where God is calling him, and he, in this case, he's asking for miracles and signs and those things, and God also works patiently with him. Now, as I said earlier, if I'm a recruiter, when I interview people, I just have to mention that, hey, this is what you're going to do, you have to convince me to work for me, right? I'm not going to convince that, hey, you need to work for me. So I would have given up much longer, but we serve a God who is patient, long-lasting patience with us, right? So that's how God works. So if you feel like I'm nothing, I am facing a challenging time, I don't fall in the right place, or I'm not good enough for this, believe that you need to come to Jesus, okay? And God is going to give you the peace and the confidence to face your most challenging situations, to overcome your self-doubt, to take the next step in life, to be strengthened in your faith, to overcome your bullying or oppressions. So don't think that your close ones can help, but you need to come to Jesus if you want to be strengthened. As the song goes, I'm going to take a moment to sing it. Are you weak and heavy laden? Come, but with a lot of care. If you know the song, Jesus, every weakness, take it. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. What a friend. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Thank you. So, if you are one of those person who feel like I'm nothing, you need to go to Jesus. Come to Him. Come to that verse is for you, right? So for the peace and the confidence, as it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9, you don't need the strengthening of this world. You need my grace, and my grace is sufficient for you. For my powers is made perfect in weakness. So this is the first group of people I wanted to focus. Now the second group of people, I'm pretty sure nobody is in this group or in this group listening to me is part of that group. I am something, right? So the first was the I am nothing group, okay? They cannot do anything. The second is the I am something, who has a I am something. So again, this is like a really difficult, narrow way. Narrow way. So either you're falling into the I am nothing group, or you're falling into that I am something group where you might feel like, hey, I have achieved something in my life, okay? I have made it so far, okay? So there are so many examples in the Bible who have had this issue. And most of the cases, they have to have a downfall. and they were taken down. Okay, so but I'm not going to take specific examples from the Bible, but I'm going to go through some few things in human history, few things that we take for granted in our life, everyday life. And if you know the background for these stories or not, or do you know how these things were invented, good for you. But if you have not, take a moment to find out how each one of these things, which we just take it for granted for every day, how it was invented or discovered. Glass or mirror. Cold ice. Okay, living in Florida, if you think it is comfortable today, think about it how it was like 150 years ago, before ice was discovered. And not discovered, they decided to they figured out how to bring ice or air cooling into a hot tropical country or state, right? Sound. We all use sound every day. Look at how it was discovered. Time, light, germs, sickness, and cleanliness. If you look at each one of these things, this is like a homework, not for small kids, but if you have a moment to read something, look for each one of these and look back how these scientists or people who discovered it found out. I'm just going to take one example for cleanliness. I'm pretty sure a good chunk of the people sitting here is from the medical field. And some of you do help with surgeries, or if you're not, at least everybody knows that if you are doing a surgery or before and after, what do you need to do? At least for the surgeons. They need to wash their hands, right? Scrub their hands, right? The right way to say it. Okay, so this is just a story that I'm going to take a moment. So do you know how that whole scrubbing got brought in? So few hundred years ago, when they had not figured out germs, or they didn't know germs existed. What people thought was all the illnesses were caused by a miasma theory, which I'm saying it wrong, but miasma theory of disease. People who have, from the medical field who know about it, sorry for messing it up. Okay, so what it simply said was, hey, you're getting sick because there's some bad vapor around you, or where you're living, or where you're traveling. So it's just a bad vapor that is causing all the sickness. They didn't even know that germs existed. There's bacteria, virus. So all they thought was, hey, this is a bad vapor that is causing us. If you take few hundred years ago or to the ancient world, they would just think it is the bad omen, or somebody is doing a, what do you call witchcraft or something, and that is causing illness. So I'm just going to take an example of a doctor, how this whole scrubbing of the hands came into play. So this doctor, it's a Hungarian doctor called Ignaz Samoa. So he took over a OB clinic, one of the first OB clinics in Vienna. Okay, and he was tasked with teaching all the doctors with the right way of taking care of the child and the mother and the whole delivery process. At the same time, they had a second clinic nearby where they were training midwives. Okay, so both these clinics are taking care of new childbirths, and what the doctor realized as he took over was his clinic, at least 10% of the women were dying as soon as the childbirth is done. They call it something called as a child bed fever. They couldn't figure out what was happening in the clinic with the doctors. But at the same time, a clinic with the midwives, they were just having 3 or 4%. In this world, 3 or 4% is also really high, but midwives were doing much better. And the doctors were having this terrible fatality or mortality rate in their clinic. They couldn't figure out what was happening. Then, out of the ordinary, a breakthrough happened where one of his colleagues, one of the doctors, cut himself while he was doing an autopsy on one of the cadavers. And as soon as he cut himself, he kind of, in few days, he developed the same symptoms of the bed fever, and he also died. That sparked an idea for him to say that, hey, because these physicians are handling dead people and live births in the same place, and they're just taking care of the autopsy in one instance, and as soon as it is done, they're going and delivering a baby, you are somehow spreading something, right? They're spreading something from the dead bodies, and the doctors are taking it with them. You know what he called it at that point? Because there was no concept of germs, right? He called it as cadaverous particles. Cadaverous particles. So that was the first time he insisted that every doctors, every physicians in his hospital, in his clinic, needs to make sure that they are scrubbing themselves, washing their hands before they do surgery and after they do an autopsy. So that started. But do you think that kind of got adopted soon enough? No. He tried to present it to his colleagues as a paper, and they just got offended, thinking that, hey, there's no way that our hands are bad. There's no way that we are passing the illness. There's no way that this is the right thing. So it took decades. It took decades for him to push. He eventually died of clinical... sorry, I'm missing the word. But eventually, it became a standard. And today, we cannot think of a surgery or a procedure without scrubbing of hands, right? So those are the things where humanity has made a lot of strides in these few years, or in this as we went through. But if you think about it, is that comparable? Now, I'm going to take a few more minutes to look at some of the current examples. If you go to the next slides. So, it was supposed to come one at a time, but anyways, it's fine. It says, the first one, how much is the world's richest person worth today? Around $138 billion, right? How much was the world's richest person in modern history worth? It was news for me too. I always thought it was John D. Rockefeller, but it is Jacob Fugger. He's a German entrepreneur. If you count his money according to today's currency, he would have had almost $400 billion. Okay? But there was another person who was much richer than him. So in all of the recorded history, his name was Mansa Musa, and they don't even know how much he was worth. It's considered that he was more worth than $400 billion. Now, I do want to bring all these things kind of going back to I am saying something pride, right? If you feel like I've achieved something, if you feel like I've gained something, I've done something, before I kind of come to this, even though I brought up this richest person or all these achievements of human history, I'm not saying that, hey, compare with them. That's not the idea. I'm just saying, even though all this has happened, we serve an awesome God, right? So his riches and his ability and his it cannot be compared. So before I came to this slide, I did want to play a video, and I will come to this part. And if you could dim the light, please. The first video, please. Now, this is just the length or the size of the smallest thing to the biggest thing in the universe, okay? Just think how it is. So what I really wanted to show with this video is, if you have any sense that I'm something, this is the God I'm serving, right? Who created all of this. And this is all that humans can observe, right? There's much more beyond that than what humans can observe. This is the awesomeness of God that we somehow often we put down, or we don't realize how awesome or big. So if you have, as I said, there's nobody here with that issue, but this is for people who are watching the video, right? So if you have that issue, remember the awesome God you are serving. For what? For the humility that you need. And I'm not saying this is bad or anything. It's just human nature. And as the verse says in Psalms 144, "O Lord, what is man that you regard of him? Or the son of man that you think of him?" So if you could go to the next slide. I know I'm about to finish. So this is, if you didn't understand anything that I just shared, this is the gist of my thought today, that all of us are falling into one of these three groups, okay? Either you are in the I am nothing group, like you don't feel like you're confident enough to do anything, or you don't feel like you are anything, or you are in the something group. And then there's this narrow path, which we as human, it is our goal that we are trying to achieve, that God, if I feel like that I'm something today, take me to that narrow path to understand your awesomeness, to give me the humility. Right? If I feel like I'm nothing, I'm not strong enough, God, give me the strength and the peace and the confidence to know that I'm serving this awesome God. And as I'm finishing this couple of slides, next slide. Now, this is the part that I would like to conclude with, and I want to ask each one of you to take it home and think about it when you're home or by yourself. Now, we looked at the part where we are saying, can we come to Jesus for all this? But I'm questioning each one of us. Can someone come to you? Do you have the skill or the ability that if a weak person or a weary person comes to you, would they find peace if they spend time with you? This is an important question we have to ask. That are we peacemakers, or if somebody needs strengthening, would they find peace with you? Can somebody turn to you for a word of comfort in their challenging time? Do you feel like you can do it? This is an important one. Where can a family member, a friend, a colleague, a church member, your neighbor, or any random person confide in you confidently? Confide, I hope everybody can tell their secrets to you confidently. Do you feel that you are that person? Can somebody come to you for that? And then lastly, can you be trusted with money or information or anything that people trust with you? Can you be that person that somebody come to you with those? So as I finish, this is the last slide, I promise. My question to you today is, are we a true reflection of Jesus Christ in the world? Because I know, as I said in the first part, we are all flawed. We are all in this group, and we keep seesawing, and we go to Jesus for it. But at the same time, we as believers are followers of Jesus Christ. We should reflect so that people can come to you with their problems, with their challenges, with their difficulties. And as the word says, are we doers of the word or just hearers? Right? It's easy to just hear it and read it and listen and just go. Or are we really doing what the word says? So as I said earlier, come to Jesus if you feel like I'm nothing. Come to Jesus if you feel like I'm something. And be that reflection of Jesus Christ, that someone else, your brother, your colleague, your friends, a random neighbor can come to you and they can find peace with you. I hope this word was a blessing for each one of you. I really appreciate your patience and time. Thank you.